Hello and welcome to Hilltop Therapy. In this video we'll be talking about all the Sonic video game references in The Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog, Sonic's odd, slapstick first attempt at a television series, which debuted back in 1993 and ran for 65 episodes. If you enjoy the video, please hit that like button as it helps me out a lot, and consider subscribing for high quality, evergreen Sonic and Sega videos. Anyway, let's take a look at all the times the series directly referenced or included elements from the Sonic games, whether through characters, music, locations, situations, or anything else. Also, as this show debuted in 1993, they probably only had Sonic 1, 2, and possibly Spinball to draw from. But draw they did. So let's get into it, starting with obvious references and gradually moving into more obscure, lesser known ones. Badniks. In addition to the main characters of Sonic the Hedgehog, Miles Tails Prower, and Dr. Robotnik, three characters obviously from the games, the series also features a number of Badniks from the first two Sonic video games. The most well-known are Robotnik's henchmen, Scratch, who is based on a Clucker from Sonic 2's Wing Fortress Zone, and Grounder, a Badnik from Aquatic Ruin Zone. Anyone who's seen the show before will recognize these two plonkers immediately, as they're in it all the time. Coconuts is also a recurring character in the show, the Coconut Throwing Monkey Badnik from Sonic 2's Emerald Hill Zone. These three get the most screen time in the series, but it doesn't stop there. There are several more video game Badniks throughout the run of the series. In episode 35, The Last Resort, we get a couple of fish Badniks, starting with Jaws from Sonic 1's Labyrinth Zone. It looks pretty close to its video game counterpart, although this one is fucking massive and is being driven by Scratch and Grounder. It's basically a submarine. The Jaws sub then deploys some other smaller Badniks, Choppers, as seen in Green Hill Zone in Sonic 1. But in the cartoon they have a different color scheme and appearance. In episode 44, Untouchable Sonic, we get Badniks galore. There is a brief underwater sequence, which appears in the episode as a TV show Scratch and Grounder are watching, and sees Sonic being chased by a group of Mashers from Emerald Hill Zone, some Chop Chops from Aquatic Ruin Zone, and an Octus from Oil Ocean Zone, all from Sonic 2. This sequence is actually taken from the unaired pilot, but was repurposed for this episode. I guess they didn't want the footage to go to waste, and we'll come back to this unaired pilot a bit later. In this same episode, in more prominent roles, we also get Roller from Sonic 1's Spring Yard Zone, and Ballhog from Scrap Brain Zone in the same game. For whatever reason, they're portrayed as some sort of gangsters, out collecting protection money for Robotnik. In the Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog universe, there are some other big differences with their appearances too. If you've got eyes, you can probably already see that Roller looks completely different to his video game counterpart, and he transforms into a bowling ball for some hilarious reason. And Ballhog, despite being a pig or hog Badnik in the games, looks more like an owl in this interpretation. He even has a beak. Maybe it was a misinterpretation based on the sprites or something when designing these characters, but I don't see how you'd think a pig's snout was a beak, but blah blah blah, whatever. It's good that they were both included and referred to by name. And spoilers by the way, these two Badniks end up mashed together by Tails into a nightmarish hybrid of the two. Horrific. The Sonic 1 Green Hill Zone Buzz Bomber Badniks show up at the beginning of episode 44, The Mystery of the Missing High Tops. But their design and color scheme is completely different from the games. In fact, I'd question whether they even were Buzz Bombers, were it not for the fact that their names are confirmed in a newspaper article which Sonic reads immediately after destroying them. Music. Let's make a very brief mention here of the music. The composers did a really good job here. The whole soundtrack is great, but the main theme for the show is clearly based on the Sonic 1 and 2 title screen music, mixed in with a big slice of In the Hall of the Mountain King and a side of Flight of the Bumblebees. I won't play the music from the show in this video due to copyright claims and such, but it really is very good and sets the tone for the show perfectly, while including plenty of nods to the games. It all feels quite Sonic-y. Locations. Let's go back to the unaired pilots I mentioned earlier for a moment. If we take a look at this grainy footage, we can see that Green Hill Zone backgrounds appear in an art style much more like the games. There's even a checkered pattern loop in here. This is obviously Green Hill Zone, But if there was ever any doubt, Robotnik even shows up with his Wrecking Ball, the actual boss from Green Hill Zone Act 3, towards the end of the pilot. The Eggmobile he's driving, which is also straight from the games, shows up in the series too, a bunch of times. Looking at what they were doing with this pilot, it really is a shame that they didn't stick with the more game-accurate locations and enemies for the full series. What a swizz! So we've had Green Hill Zone, now let's look at some locations that actually showed up in the finished series. In the second episode of the show, Subterranean Sonic, Robotnik sends Scratch and Grounder to apprehend Sonic in the Marble Zone. He even refers to it by name. It's completely different to its video game appearance, with the only real similarity being the inclusion of some purple rocks on the surface of the zone. Apart from that, it's basically a mine. A couple of locations which are likely to be video game references are Hilltop Village from episode 17, Over the Hill Hero, and the underwater city of Labyrinth, as it's referred to by Robotnik from episode 26, Submerged Sonic, which is presumably Sonic 1's Labyrinth Zone. But the similarities here end at the names alone. Actually, Labyrinth, being an underwater city, does have water in it, obviously, and also another appearance of some Jaws badniks who are from that zone. Next, in episode 55, the Mobius 5000, Sonic and Tails enter a race with our old pal Cockblock the dog, and we see a few different zones. The first location of note is Sonic 2's Chemical Plant Zone, which includes the stage's iconic pipes that Sonic runs across in the games. But instead, they're being used as a racetrack in this adaptation. The racers then head to Sonic 2's Casino Night Zone, referred to here as Casino Zone, which is located next to Chemical Plant. Finally, they enter, and we'll also transition to another section here, the Special Zone. Yep, in this same episode, they use a star post to travel to the Special Zone as a means of a shortcut to win the race. This is clearly the half-pipe Special Zone from Sonic 2, and Sonic and Tails have to collect enough rings while traveling through it in order for the shortcut to work. This is more or less straight out of Sonic 2, and it's possibly not the only time we've seen a Special Zone in the show. In an earlier episode, Trail of Missing Tails, we are introduced to the Warp of Confusion. It's an odd place which is full of floating fish, as well as Robotnik's batshit crazy cousin. I think this whole weird area is meant to be a reference to Sonic 1's special stages. They got the floating fish, but they're missing the birds and the Chaos Emeralds. Speaking of which, next section, Chaos Emeralds. The Chaos Emeralds show up in this series. Kind of. In a 4-part series of episodes, later packaged together as a feature called The Quest for the Chaos Emeralds, we are introduced to Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog's take on the Chaos Emeralds. In this adaptation, there are only 4 of them, and each have an individual power: invisibility, invincibility, immortality, and the power of life itself. Collecting these together won't give you a supersonic, but it will give you a muscular hunk Robotnik with the powers of a god. Actually, a 5th Chaos Emerald was also introduced in episode 66, Fast and Easy. It's the most powerful emerald apparently, and after being activated as an altar in the Secret Zone, basically another special zone I guess, it can apparently be used to sink 100 square miles of land into the sea. To me that doesn't sound as powerful as being a god, being immortal, creating life and so on that the other emeralds can do, but well, whatever. I guess if your goal is to sink 100 square miles of land into the ocean, then this 5th Chaos Emerald is second to none. Thinking about it, I guess it could be argued that another emerald shows up in this series. There's one which is seen in the Quest for the Chaos Emerald saga, which is worn by Sonic's mummified ancestor. Could that be a Chaos Emerald? Maybe. It seems to have powers. I mean, it's kept him alive. But they never say it's a Chaos Emerald in the episode, so I'm going to assume not. Traps and miscellaneous elements. Throughout the series, we get traps and miscellaneous elements that could be taken as references to the games. For example, in episode 50, Robotnik's Pyramid Scheme, we get spike traps, Scratch and Grounder collecting rings in order to enter a tomb, and a big block that has to get pushed into some lava in a scene straight out of Sonic 1's Marble Zone. In this same episode, the miscellaneous emerald I mentioned a moment ago also gives Sonic a shield reminiscent of those seen in the games. In episode 59, Tails' Tail, Tails flies a red plane similar to the Tornado. To be honest, there's lots of moments in the series like this that seem inspired by the games. Probably too many to go into here, and because they're not direct references in many instances, let's move on to our final topic. Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog's adaptation of Sonic Spinball. Okay, maybe I'm being extremely generous calling this an adaptation, but Episode 41, Attack on Pinball Fortress, could be considered a loose adaptation of 1993's Sonic Spinball. In it, Sonic has to enter Robotnik's Pinball Fortress, basically a giant pinball machine, and make his way through it. But the thing that made me think the creators were probably adapting the game in this instance was the inclusion of what Robotnik calls Boss Scorpion. To me, this seems like an all-ages version of the nightmarish Scorpius boss from the first level of Sonic Spinball, Toxic Caves. Side note here, but for reals, some of those Sonic Spinball bosses were terrifying. We'll talk about it someday. And there we have it. That's everything I could think of from the early Sonic video games that showed up in Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog. Have I missed anything? Probably. Let me know in the comments below. I'm sure as soon as I've uploaded this, I'll realize I've missed something out. Also, if you're interested, you can find more of my Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog videos in the links at the end of this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that like button as it helps me out a lot. And for weekly, high-quality, evergreen Sonic and Sega videos, please consider subscribing. Thanks a lot, and I'll see you next time.